Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Basic Skills series for Teapot RPG. In this series I'm hoping to go over the basic skills used in most tabletop crafting. This means I've got somewhere to reference people back to when questions are asked in the future, rather than trying to explain the same thing in multiple places and potentially making mistakes about it. Okay, so in tabletop crafting, the most common materials you will find are XPS foam and wood, mainly balsa wood or popsicle sticks. Both of these are very porous, so before you paint them or pretty much do anything to them, you need to seal the surface. Particularly in the case of XPS foam, it's also very prone to attack from solvents. So for example, if you spray paint it with something that's got acetone in, it will just dissolve. To get around this, people tend to seal it with Mod Podge. Mod Podge is a decoupage glue. If you can't get actual Mod Podge, you can get just own branded craft store decoupage glue, but I find it's not quite as good. By the nature of being a decoupage glue, it is designed to actually seal stuff rather than just glue it. So this is PVA glue, some form of flow aids, and some form of resins mixed together. So when you paint it onto a surface, rather than it just gluing it together, it will actively cure into a hard resin surface. It also helps to protect your craft's longevity and make them a bit more rigid so that when you pick up your thin bit of foam in your hand, it doesn't just flop. It's a particularly disappointing cannon if you pick it up and it goes like that. Anyway, after that, we'll get on to just basic glues that you will find. Most common one you will find is just straight PVA glue. This wouldn't normally be clear, it would normally be white. However, when I bought it, the clear one was on offer and the white one wasn't. So I got the clear one. After that, you'll then run into tacky glue. Tacky glue is just PVA glue with less water in it, so it tacks up quicker. So let's say you've got two thin bits of foam that you want to stick buttered up against each other. With PVA glue, you'll have to stay here for a while holding it, or it'll just droop. With tacky glue, you'll have to stay here for far less time. And that's why you use Mod Podge, because otherwise, heavy-handed people snap things like that. Anyway, it is most common to mix Mod Podge with black paint as a base coat. I like to keep some mixed with white paint on hand as well. All that this means is you only have to paint it once as a base coat. If you don't mix in some kind of paint, you'll have to paint it once with the Mod Podge and then once with some colour as your base, unless you particularly want your base material to show through. Typically you need between 10 and 30% paint by volume to get it to a colour. So I'll just demonstrate that. Little glass jam jar to do it, and fill it up with Mod Podge to about the halfway mark. You can mix more, but it's better to have half a container than an overflowing container. Come on, flow out. It's about enough. We'll also say this amount of Mod Podge is massively overkill. I got given it by a friend. I would more recommend getting 8 or 16 fluid ounce containers at the most. This is sort of industrial level. Let's see if I can tip this. Nope. You can see how much more easily it flows than PVA glue though. So we add that about halfway. Just add a squirt of craft store black paint. That's probably more than I need. Then stir it in with whatever the hell I can find near to me. Wooden stick, that'll do. You want to make sure it's mixed in well so you don't have a big black lump in the middle. And you also want to add as little paint as possible, because the more paint you add, the weaker it'll get. Not by a lot, but it does add up. I'm not sure if I've already mentioned it, but again, Mod Podge is white, it will dry clear. So this will appear more grey in this than it will in the end product. I reckon. reckon it's worth fitting a bit more Mod Podge and paint in there. It's better to creep up on it than try and get there immediately, because you can always add more paint. Taking it out is significantly more difficult. As in, unless you happen to be a chemist with access to a lab, probably not happening. Even more paint, I guess. This one must be particularly weak. This is why I say between 10 and 30%, because with craft store paint it's not all that reliable in terms of the pigment strength in it. Sometimes it's very strong, sometimes it's not. It's not worth getting nice artists' paints or anything to do this though. Some people like to pigment it with ink instead. Again, I don't think that's worth the cost. It's perfectly good enough just with paint. Sorry that this is taking so long. I'd just rather show exactly how much black paint I mix, because otherwise people will ask. Not sure why, but it seems to be a sticking point within the tabletop crafting community. It really is though, just keep adding it until it turns black. Well, either that or keep adding it until you get bored of adding it and then declare it good enough, which is what I'm going to do. I was going to mix some white up on video as well, but I think I've bored you enough by mixing one, so next video there will magically be a little pot with white mixed up as well. Just put that to the side. And for demonstration purposes, I'm going to take some foam, 2 thin bits of it, paint one with Mod Podge and one with just paint, and then we'll come back in half an hour to an hour once they're hardened and show you the difference in strength. Other important thing with Mod Podge, or any kind of glue, don't use good brushes with it. That's a great way to ruin a good brush. I would go with synthetic brushes, and old disheveled ones at that. Synthetic brushes because you can wash them a lot more viciously. So this one can be Mod Podge. You can see how it just flows on a lot easier than PVA would. This one is also deliberately cracked so we can see that it will hold that together. And as with all things, it's better to put it on thinly and multiple times. Should specify with that multiple times before it dries. If you have to put on multiple coats of Mod Podge once it's dried, you're probably wasting your time. So that's one done in Mod Podge. Go the next most ruined brush, and I'm just going to do the other one in straight PVA. else have I missed in a discussion about this? Other types of glue you'll often run into are cyanoacrylate or super glue. I don't have any at the moment to show that. It's just a liquid glue that will set things very quickly. It's also another thing that gets on a bit too well with foam, and it'll get all warm and melty. It's useful if you have super glue to also have super glue accelerator. Super glue, although it dries very quickly, you can literally take something, make a bit of foam, hold another bit to it with super glue on one side and accelerator on the other, and the second they touch, it's set. Or at least damn near set. You can make building some things much quicker, but you do have to be careful about material choice with it. As you can see with this, it's taking quite a bit more PVA to coat this, because it just all soaks into the surface. So then, now that I've bored you again by painting glue onto things, and bumped the camera nicely, I will be back in half an hour to an hour, is about how long this takes to dry. You should leave it at least half an hour. It can take longer depending on climate though. Here it's quite damp at the moment, so probably more like an hour. I'll leave a clock in place just to show the passage of time. And I'm going to go and wash these brushes quickly, because once glue's set in a brush, it's not really a brush anymore. So then, I shall be back in half an hour or an hour to demonstrate the difference in strength. Right then. Sorry about that time-lapse ending a bit abruptly. My power went off, so not a lot I can do. This is definitely dry now though, at least. You just don't get to watch it dry, which I'm sure was highly engaging and gripping to watch essentially glue dry. Anyway, not sure where I was even aiming to go with this, of how the hell I show on a video this is stronger than this. Yes, I can show this wiggles, or just snaps, whereas this doesn't. Well, apart from the bits where it was already snapped, and even then you can see the Mod Podge holds the edge together. Really should have picked a solid bit to demonstrate this with, but it's much stronger. Take my word for it. So, now that I've bored people by talking about glue, and not really coming to an appropriate conclusion, it's just use Mod Podge, it is good. Mix it with paint so that you don't have to do this twice. It's stronger than PVA. I'll end this video now, and I'll try in the next one to hopefully have power all the way through, and we'll be doing something with wood texturing.